Axonius Federal Systems gives federal agencies the confidence to control complexity by mitigating threats, navigating risks, automating response times, and complying with federal cybersecurity guidelines. AFS is the only federal solution available that integrates with hundreds of sources to provide asset observability. Hello from Omaha. My name is Ross John Fortune, recording from DOTIS 2024, where national security leaders are examining the future of integrated defense through IT superiority. Joining me now is Lori Wade, Intelligence Community Chief Data Officer. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Although we did learn earlier that it's the Silicon Prairie.
Yeah.
Which really, I was excited to hear and surprised. I had not heard that before.
That was new to me too.
Yeah,
I had never heard that. I'd heard of Silicon Valley of the East, the 270 corridor.
That's right.
And I've heard of the Valley, but this was a new one. So that's,
and here we are at the forefront of it.
Yeah,
it's
really.
Amazing.
Really. So you talked today about data centricity and where it fits within the strategy in the IC. What challenges does the IC face in getting to better data centricity, and how are you addressing those challenges?
It's a good question. One that we spent a great deal of time thinking about as we were putting the IC data strategy together. And I go back to, I think what I said on the stage is we are a data organization at a core. That is the business. The word intelligence starts with the ones and zeros, right? And then we take that in. We have analyst. We have context. We exploit the data to get to the place where it becomes information. And then once it goes through the exploitation, it's then actionable, so knowledge, and ultimately intelligence. And so just getting the paradigm shift from a system-centric to a data-centric view of what the business we're in, and then how do we architect our data for that ultimate use, collect for purpose. We spent years focused on collection and analysis, but the evolving technologies, all of the glitzy technologies that are coming and are here, have a heavy reliance on data and quality data. And so getting that mindset that that's the business we're in and that we have to have end-to-end data management and plan for it became a big challenge because we were so enamored by the technology, by the fact that we collect and analyze without thinking of everything that has to happen to our data, and especially in a digital and data-driven world, right?
So how do you manage all of that? The data management obviously is critical to having all this information. I imagine that's a challenge.
It's a big challenge. One that when I came into this role, I'm in my third year of this in this role. And one of the things we did immediately was try to elevate the role of the chief data officers across the 18 elements. I chair the CDO council, but a lot of the CDOs were dual-hatted or embedded in the CIO shops or buried in with that. Now, we're not there at 100% across the 18, but the first thing is getting a data professional involved, and then how do we bring data management and data management planning to the very front end of everything. Before we collect or acquire data, we have to think about it all the way through. And for us in the intelligence community, that's not just all the way through from collection or acquisition of data to disposition. To dissemination. It's also through disposition because we have laws under the National Archives. We have things to the data we have to do. We have Attorney General guidelines. All of that has to be put onto the data and carried out through the life of it, and to include even how long we can keep data. So a lot of the data, if it meets a certain definition, according to the Attorney General guidelines, then we can only keep that data for a certain number of years, or we could keep it for the life. However, we need to mark that data. One of the things we've done is before we even do a major system acquisition or a new collection platform, it has to go through this process by which requirements are then funded with National Intelligence Priority Funding. So I inserted myself into that process. And now there's a milestone B that they have to have a data management plan before they'll get funding for that. And then each of the 18 elements created data management plan templates of which they have to now apply for all new data. So we have our legacy data, but I'm trying to stop the bleed out from as we go forward, right? It's that idea of, we talk about data as a strategic asset, but only if it's managed well. Otherwise, it becomes a liability from a cyber and an insider threat It also becomes a liability from a cost perspective, right? It costs a lot to index and store and compute data. And so without, volumes of data doesn't help us. The right data is what we got to focus on. And so managing it just like we would any other asset. So think about this. Another way I've overcome the challenge is in the IC, every chair, every monitor, everything we have has a little barcode on it. And we will track that from the time it's purchased until the time we dispose of it. But we don't do the same of our data, right? We track our money. That's another thing I'm hitting hard is that we don't even understand the total cost of ownership of our data. So I'm working with the IC CFO on how do we do a methodology by which we track the cost of our data from the point of collection all the way through, or acquisition. So this applies to open source and commercially available as well. How do we track that all the way through? So we're coming up with, we're up to 5 budget codes that we're going to put on our data to be able to look at that so we can understand the total cost of ownership of our data. If it's an asset, then we have to manage it.
How do you make that asset useful across all 18 parts? Because interoperability is always a concern.
Absolutely. So in the assessment of upfront about what's the purpose of the collecting the data, then who needs the data? For what mission use is it going to be valuable? What's the classification of that data? All of these decisions should be determined upfront so that we can tag and label the data for discoverability, for accessibility, and for that interoperability factor. So we have services of common concern. We have the IC data services that are available across all 3 fabrics today. Those need to be adopted so that we have integrated data layers. So at that integrated data layer is where we have discoverability of data and then the usability. Because without understanding and inventorying our data, then how do we ever expect that people can even discover it or use it? And if we haven't marked and tagged that data accordingly and put it into the IC data catalog, then how are we going to gain access to it? So you have to think of this through everything that you do. And then if you're in one of the 18 elements, you should also be thinking about that data that you've collected or purchased. Are there other people who need access and use to that up front? And then that is the rigor of end-to-end data management that the Intelligent Security Directive 504 is focused on, right? That's how we got to make it real. Because if they're not collecting for purpose and they're not collecting with the mind or purchasing data with the mindset that it needs to go across, then we're not going to get there from here.
I'm sure you get a lot of pitch. You talked about the AI gold rush, a lot of notions of, this AI solution will internally, externally, wherever is going to fix this. How do you make sure that the AI implementation to manage this data is done securely, responsibly, ethically, all the things?
Well, that's where the partnering is so key. And you see that in the vision for the IT environment for the IC, there's a data-centric pillar, right? You see in the zero trust architecture strategy, there's a data pillar. So we each have our areas of focus, right? This is where that digital C-suite concept comes in. But where we need to look is where the intersections occur, we have to be solving for those. And from my perspective, anything we're doing to the data, right? Because we care a great deal about cybersecurity, and people talk about, the securing the crown jewels, and they put all of this around the system or devices without actually thinking about what's the data in that system or on those devices. So we have to work together so that we're doing our part. So when it goes in that system, it doesn't take on the classification or the security of that system. It keeps the tags of the handling instructions and the attributes of that data. And so that's where the IC data reference architecture, the one that we just signed, we're going to be rolling out. That is how we're going to start to do that. That's why I talk about architecting for quality data and AI solutions, because it is architecting. There's not shortcuts. We don't talk about the plumbing, right? We have to talk about those things because it matters, because now you're trying to apply technologies and there's capability that's available that we've never had in the past. And they're right. It's no longer that humans can go through all of that, but we still have to keep the human factored into it, right? So we have to make our data consumable by humans and machines. And then there's the other factor that's important, and why data management end to end and this data reference architecture is so important is because in the intelligence community, there's a little factor that we have to care about also is explainability. Hallucinations won't work for us. But you don't just hope it happens. You have to actually do the work to make sure that we have that explainability factor. We have the provenance and lineage throughout the whole entire data lifecycle.
Within the architecture, how does AI sort of factor into that, and how are you rolling that out?
We're focused on getting our data, right, the quality data, and getting it tagged and labeled accordingly. All of those factors I talked about, like Attorney General guidelines, privacy and civil liberties. We have to make sure that PII data, if it's in there, all these things have to be factored so that then when we go to the next stage of building AI models, right, you have to put all of that work, the training data, right? You have to have trusted data. We have all this quality data, and then we have to make sure that the models we're bringing in and we're building, that's still a human in the loop, because we have to build guardrails. We have to do the prompt engineering. None of the data and open models that are in the open have been trained on national security, defense, or intel data. So that's work that has to be done. We already have AI running on the high side today. We already have large language models. We already have that there, but it's very bespoke and boutique ways. What I'm concerned about and what that data reference architecture for the IC is concerned with is how are we going to scale that? Right? And so that's the pathway to scaling.
So scaling it involves people. The workforce is a topic I love to talk about. So how do you make sure to get the right people in, retain them, train them, and make sure they're ready for this new world?
That's something that keeps me up. That's the one that bothers me the most, right? And you saw I presented, when I was talking about the AI gold rush, right? There's a lot of investment in the heavy on the compute side, heavy on the thinking of the chips, semiconductor, all this, but we have to be focused on every other aspect on that chart, which includes the skilled workforce. Right, we're all competing for the skilled workforce across the private sector, across the DoD, with the IC, and across the globe. And so we have an extra burden that we have to think about. How do we get a workforce that wants to come into a cleared environment, right? And how do we give them interesting work? How do we create an environment that can have the flexibility, but also give them meaningful ways to apply the expertise that they have? Like, I know the data science cadre, right? They want to do data science work. We can't bring them in and then have them being, data engineers and labeling data. So we have to think it all the way through, right? All the skill sets that we need to start investing in, and we need to think of new and different ways in which we can bring them into the workforce. And then for our current workforce, we have to quickly upskill them, right? And there's across the board. I'm talking about the people that are focused on acquisitions and contracts, the attorneys, everyone has to have a certain level of digital acumen. So we're working a lot with the National Intelligence University, a lot of the different schools that are at the agencies to put in modules and even create curriculum around data acumen. But there's also then the data tradecraft. A lot of the positions, analysts, targeters, a lot of people need to understand, there's a lot of tradecraft that goes into the work that we do in the intelligence community for analysts and targeters and operators, but they need to add a level data tradecraft to what they're doing now. So we're focused on that as well. And that's why one of the things we did is we're setting up that National Security Data and Policy Institute. It was awarded to the University of Virginia, and it's housed with their School of Data Science, is to try to look and see how do we bring from a data, tradecraft, and acumen, all the data policy, all that work that needs to be done to bring into the IC. So we're creating here are the requirements, here are the mission areas where we're looking to do this, take a look at it, and then how we bring that back into the IC.
Well, thanks so much for doing it.
Okay, thank you.
This podcast was a production of GovCIO Media and Research. If you like what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on the podcast platform of your choice. And don't forget to tell a friend or colleague. To explore the rest of our content, visit our website, govciomedia.com. Do you have a topic you want us to discuss? Contact us at newsletter@govcio.com. I'm Ross John Fortuné.